On that note, I want to introduce this for a moment. Can you speak to us about the chief rabbi of Africa, Rabbi Pincus? And before you tell us of him and describe for us his role, I want you to just kind of paint the picture for us as quote unquote blacks here in America and the Caribbeans and throughout the diaspora of the implications of there being a black chief rabbi of Africa. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so Rabbi Pincus is someone that I've known about for years. We actually even spoke, like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. We just communicated, and he was in the old city of Jerusalem, and he was studying at different places, but the main place he studied at was a yeshiva called Beit El Yeshiva, and it's in the old city of Jerusalem, and it was started, I don't even know how long back, by a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Shalom Sharabi, which is known as the Rashash. And he was a Sephardic Kabbalistic master. And this yeshiva, everybody who was anybody from that time to now has studied there. And so Rabbi Pincus, Rabbi Mordecai Eliyahu, all types of people, were learned at this yeshiva. And so Rabbi Pincus was one of the top students there, and he received his smicha there. And he's originally from Congo, and he grew up, but he came and lived in France. And from France, he grew up, and he was involved in all types of stuff, businesses, different spiritualities, whatever. And he came to this awakening of his relationship with the Torah, and went through, the process of acclimating himself to the community, and eventually moved to Israel. Anyways, long story short, there's different levels of teaching, right? The system of Pardes, right? So you have the system of Pardes, which is Peshat, Remish, Drash, and Sod, right? And so when we learn the Torah, we learn from all these different levels, right? To have a complete understanding of what God is trying to convey to us at the level we're at the moment we're reading, right? And so when I first started learning in yeshiva, I learned at a place, as I said before, Or Sameach, and here it's a very respected yeshiva, but we really spent a lot of time in Gemara, right? In the Talmud, right? The Mishnah, the Gemara, and I spent years in I'm talking about I would wake up in the morning, and I would come home to my apartment at night. And the whole day, I'm sitting there staring and going back and forth and understanding the Talmud, understanding the coded language, understanding the Mishnah, the Gemara, the different, the Rishonim, all the different Achronim, all the different levels of communicating, this dynamic, right? But we would consider much of that in the place of Peshat, right? Which the literal interpretation, Remes, the idea of hints, and then also Drash, we would learn, because I would learn like the Midrashim and all these different things. So we will learn Drash. But the level of Sod it's in its own category, in its own world. So Rabbi Pincus became a master in Sod, and his teachers are the main masters in all of Israel, all of Jerusalem. Like they're historically, like I'm talking about people who are still alive today that do humongous things, like are really able, when we talk about the 99%, the people who become masters in the Sod can actually influence the 99% with their thoughts. And Rabbi Pincus is like, I've seen, and I've seen Rabbi Pincus heal people that were sick. You know what I mean? I came with him, part of his entourage, and I've seen him do different Kabbalistic things and really, do amazing things. And so I met. You gonna say something?
No. I'm listening.
No. So I had a good friend of mine who's also a rabbi, Rabbi Zohar Mars, who's really dealing with North America. He's over there, and so he introduced me. Cause me and Zohar were good friends. So he says, you gotta come and learn. So anyway, so Rabbi Pincus started a yeshiva in the old city called Bostina Kadisha, and the main focus of the yeshiva was teaching students. Most of the students there were Africans and African Americans. There were other people from other backgrounds there too, but the majority of the students were basically Black people. And so his
in Israel.
Yeah, in Israel, in Jerusalem.
That's right. Okay.
And so most of the classes there were learning how to go into the text, whether it was the Ari, whether Rabbi Nechunia, the Zohar, all different, the sages. I mean, you could go on names and names of different sages, but we would learn how to translate and understand the coded language of the text built around Kabbalah, right? And we would even relearn. He even taught me how to relearn things like the Gemara and the Mishnah, because there's a way to learn it from the definitions of, Peshat, Remish, Drash. There's that language, and then there's another language of Sod, meaning there's different definitions, right? So some of the words that we have in the Gemara may mean something on a Peshat level, but if you apply that same definition to the level of Sod, the Kabbalah, the secrets, you will get a whole nother understanding and the outlook of what's being said by by Chazal, right? So I was there, and he taught a lot of his Torah from the Black perspective. And so one of the things he developed, which, the aspects already existed, but he developed, was what they call Nusach Afrik, right? And Nusach Afrik was basically like, when people say they're Ashkenazi or they're Sephardic or they're Mizrahi, there's a certain way that they pray, right? The way they pronounce words. There's certain foods that they eat. There's certain styles of dress and the certain roles that the rabbi plays and in the community and different people. It's a whole different system. So Rabbi Pinchas was able to get to the conclusion, and he used a lot of it, of the Ethiopian community, how important it is for people to have their cultural identity as they go through Chazal, as they go through the Halakha. And so he developed this concept called Nusach Afrik, which is very much rooted in the teachings of Ben Ish Chai, who was a huge Kabbalist in Iraq, in Baghdad, and the teachings of the Ari, and the teachings of his different teachers, the Sod, in his own, Chidushim in certain areas. And so he designed that. He just recently published a prayer book, a Siddur, with all the Nusach and the different outlooks, but it's very much rooted in Kabbalah. Like anyone who studied Kabbalah would see Nusach Afrik and see that. And so he sees that as a mechanism of healing for many of the people whose heritage got lost in Africa, and also African Americans who want to be able to have a more of a African perspective of Nusach around the teachings of Chazal and the teachings of Sod.
I think that's extremely important, Rabbi Mordecai, and I'll just name a couple of reasons why I think that's important. If there's one thing that I've observed about many people of African American descent that come into conversion, many of them adopt Ashkenazic Minhagim, and many of them take on the customs, ways, and manners of Ashkenazic culture, which is essentially foreign to the American experience or the African diaspora experience, as opposed to wanting to want to emulate more of those cultural dispensations that can be found on the continent from people like the Igbo, people like the Ethiopian Beta Israel. So I'm loving the idea, which I'm hearing from the first time from you, that the chief rabbi of Africa, Rabbi Pinchas, he has developed what is known as Nusach Afrik, which is a way for us to acclimate ourselves and come into our cultural continuity of this great tradition and our cultural display of it, because it's very important. When I speak to an African American and they tell me that they went through conversion, there was a time that I would debate them. There's a time that I would maybe even attack them verbally. But as we grow older, we happen to grow wiser. So now I'm more of a listener than an attacker, and I like to hear people's perspectives. So in just hearing them out, some of the common features that I'm always hearing is how immersed they are in Ashkenazic culture and lens and ways of viewing and understanding Torah, its tradition, and said culture, as opposed to cultural aspects of our continuity that can be found on the continent from people who also identify as being part of Israel, again, such as the Igbo. For instance, if I was to say to you on Friday evening, Shabbat Shalom, many African Americans that come into conversion will say, happy Shabbos. right? They give me the Ashkenazic tone. And so I think that this is important because it allows us to develop autonomy within this. Like one of the things that they say makes America unique is that America is a federation. Each state has a certain degree and measure of autonomy. Well, a lot of people might be surprised by this, but this fact exists to a certain extent even among the tribes of Israel. Remember the issue that occurs between, I believe it's in the book of Judges, where all of the tribes were aligned and ready to do battle with the tribe of Benjamin because they were unwilling to give up those men that had given to some very nasty ways of morality and ethics at that time in the book of Judges. I care not to say the matter for the sake of YouTube. However, what Chazal comments on is that what the tribe of Benjamin is essentially doing is they're exerting their own tribal autonomy, which is to say that this is a national matter, but it is also a tribal matter. And as such, the Torah gives us the ability to judge among our own tribe. So before we bring it to a national level, before, let's say, a great body of judges like the Sanhedrin, we would rather perform that duty within our own tribe. Right. So again, even in the Torah, we can see like this clear understanding of autonomy for culture. We are taught that the children of Israel had 12 banners and 12 flags, and no two looked alike. Right. We're told that one tribe would say Sibboleth and the other tribe would say Shibboleth. Right. The tribal array of the Israelites was unique, distinct, and remarkable. But because of its distinctive and unique nature, its set apart nature, that each tribe introduced a different flavor and way of looking at and understanding the great document that we come to know as Torah. And when all of these 12 contributions came together, it made for the holy seed of Hashem, the holy children of Hashem. So I think that this is important, Rabbi, that you're pointing this out to us, because many people, like myself and my community, would, among other reasons for rejecting conversion, they would say, I don't want to come through conversion and then I have to become like an Ashkenazic Yehudi, right? What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's an important thing. So, in our generation, there's fruits and gifts in all the different Nusachim, right? There's different things that benefit. There's different sages. There's different all types of things. Now, Rabbi Pinchas's resolve comes from what he saw, what is on eyes. What he saw, what is on eyes, is this idea of what happened to the Ethiopians. The Ethiopians had almost like 2,000 plus year tradition. They had for years, generations. But when they came to Israel, many of them let go of their traditions that they had in Ethiopia, their wise men, the Kishas, all these different things, their Masura, and they opted out and they joined, into Sephardic and Mizrahi and Ashkenaz and these different things with good spirits wanting to integrate into the community, right? Now, what happened one generation later is that now the kids don't really keep anything and they're not religious at all. And so Rabbi Pinchas is saying that once you remove culture from people and you apply a spiritual dynamic to it, it doesn't last, right? So he's dealing with people in Africa, right? He's dealing with the whole continent. He's dealing with people in the East, in the Central, in the West, and everything in between. That there's all these people that identify themselves as Israelites and Jews. So how does he deal with that, right? How does he put them in a position where they can maintain who they are and be able to be strong within they are? Because he's all about the Torah, right? He's all about the Torah, and he's completely in that frame. And so he's dealing with that issue. Now, a lot of African Americans, it's a little bit different in our regard, because for us, we don't have a prior understanding of our connection, right? We don't have one, right? It was erased from North America, right? We have reminiscences, like people like yourself who connected to Rabbi Levy, Rabbi Ford, Rabbi Matthews, but most African Americans, unless they grew up in that thing, they don't know about it. So it's easy for them to adapt with the community that they're around, right? Now, the thing is, Rabbi Pinos is not saying like all Black Jews should hold this way. He's saying, however, he wants it to be an option, right? And it should be an option that people can decide that, okay, I want to have certain cultural foods on my Pesach. I want to have a Haggadah that maybe have certain ideas that inspire me, that are culturally relevant to myself. You know, the way I pray, the way I praise God, you know, could be, you know, in a way that's cultural for myself, right? But it doesn't divert from the Shulchan Aruch. It doesn't divert from the teachings of Chazal. It doesn't go away from the teachers of the masters of the Sod. So when people find their own thing, it's not to say that they're wrong, but when you're dealing with people who already have an existing tradition, like the people in Igbo, right? You can't take them away from Amunana, right? But you can give a halakhic guidance and a nusach that they could, you know, participate and be on the same page as everyone else in the collective nation, right? So the Ashkenaz has a way, but within Ashkenaz, you have Litvish, you have Hasidim, you have all types of things. Same thing by Mizrahi. You have different types of people in the Mizrahi. Sephardim, there's all different types of Sephardim, right? In terms of how they understand things, right? People from Mexico, you know, are potentially different than people from Spain, right? So it's just saying that the Jewish umbrella is huge, but there are people, like you're saying, that want their own cultural identity connected to their everyday practices, but still have the same prayer book. So if they go into an Ashkenazi shul because they got to pray and it's mincha and they only there's no other minyan, that, you know, they could still go in there and their siddur, they're on the same page as everyone else. Now the footnotes in different components, you know, may be more culturally relevant, right, or more connected to the Kabbalah and different things like this. But in general, the idea is not to create any separation. The idea is to create more unity, and he in his heart is really for a lot of the African Americans that he feels that are descendants of these tribes in Africa that, you know, may not want to, or may not, because of different historical experiences, may not want to or feel comfortable going certain places where they don't feel like maybe they're appreciated or the door's not open to them. So like Rabbi Demota said, you know, people could form their own communities and build their own communities and live righteously in their communities and not need to necessarily depend on anybody but their own, like their own self.